Welcome to the Planning for Life podcast with certified financial planner professional Russell Jacobs and financial life advisor Carl Coolidge. Carl and Russell will share creative strategies and ideas for overcoming challenges in your personal and financial life. Inevitably, life happens, and we will empower you to reach your destination. Thanks for joining us. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to another podcast with Carl Coolidge from Jacobs, Coolidge and Company. There is a weird generation thing going on right now. We hear a lot about baby boomers, and of course everybody complains about millennials, but the people who we're going to focus on today are truly solidly right between those, which is Generation X, people who were born in the mid-60s to about the mid-80s. And what are the biggest financial struggles they have? So, Carl, you and I are both within this age range. And what are the big things when you're sitting down with a couple who are right within it, solidly, squarely in Gen X? What are the sorts of things that you're hearing are their biggest concerns?
Well, I would say, it's a combination of things. A lot of Generation X has really just begun to focus on savings. Mm-hmm. As we've discussed, they're in their 40s and 50s, and unfortunately, a lot of them have not planned or been diligent savers prior to this. And they also have children that are, again, can obviously range in different ages, but certainly are closer to college than not. So that's a big issue on their plate. So they're trying to find the balance between they need to be saving for retirement, but they also want to be able to help their children pay for college, because a lot of them had, student debt and student loans that have weighed them down over the years. And so they don't want to saddle their children with the same scenario. Sure. So I think it's just an awkward dynamic. There's a lot of different factors going with Generation X right now.
Now, I know you can't give specific financial planning or investment advice, and that's not what I'm asking you here. I'm asking more prioritization. Because you really hit something that's near and dear to my heart. I've got twin 15-year-old boys. We're looking at the cost of college.
It's unbelievable.
It's really remarkable, astounding. I mean, I thought college was expensive when I was in grad school, but what I paid for grad school credits are what my kids are paying for undergrad stuff now. So how do you rob Peter to pay Paul? What sort of questions do you ask? How do you as a financial planner figure out which direction and try to guide your clients on which way to go?
To me, it's balance. You can't sacrifice one for the other, meaning you can't say, well, I'm just going to put my kids through college and then I'll begin focusing on retirement then, because as we've known, and we've talked about in previous podcasts, timing or longevity is your friend. So you've got to be able to save, and the earlier you can do so, the better. A line that I talk to or say to a lot of my clients and potential clients is, you can borrow for college, you can't borrow for retirement. And so I think that's a big key as we're trying to divide up dollars and make priorities. It's, you want to take care of yourself first and make sure you're going to be on track for retirement, or at least get close to it. And then college is secondary. And it's not to say your kids are secondary, but it goes back to what I just mentioned, which is, there are other options for college. There's scholarships, there's grants, there's, you're able to borrow and get loans. So I think, again, you've got to find the balance where you don't totally sacrifice one or the other, but you've got more flexibility when it comes to college. And sometimes, honestly, depending on your children's ages, you don't know if they're going to take a traditional college route. Yeah. They may do other things, so you don't want to put all your eggs in that basket either.
Well, if you do borrow against your retirement, or if you do slow down or even stop saving for retirement, you're going to become boomerang parents, right? We talk about boomerang kids, but you're going to end up being boomerang parents because you're not going to be able to retire. Or even if you do, you're not going to have the income potentially to stay retired because you haven't saved enough. Now, how else, again, from a financial planning standpoint, Carl, I've got a lot of stuff I got to do. I've got a lot of expenses, especially since my kids are, about hopefully launching into the world. Everything from, how expensive car insurance is for teenagers. And man, it just seems to me that your job, it would be so terrifically overwhelming, especially where I am at in my life, because there's just so many factors. How do you organize this stuff? I know you've got a great financial planning team, so I'm not trying to necessarily totally put you on the spot, but help us understand this a little bit more.
Well, I think it's important to take it in bite-sized chunks. As I tell my wife all the time, we will get overwhelmed with some situations. As we have a saying, don't make a molehill into a mountain. And that, to me, rings true here, which is you've got to deal with each piece, again, as part of the entire situation. But say first, okay, we want to deal with college. Well, what does that look like? What is it going to cost? Where are they going to go? Can we allocate any savings to that? We also need to make sure that we're putting away for retirement. Are we taking advantage of matching? Are we taking advantage of other tools that our employers offer to be able to save money on a systematic basis, or if you will, almost forced savings, which is typically good for people. And then also you want to make sure that you have the proper amount of insurance coverage that, again, if something happens to you or your spouse, because you want to make sure that things are taken care of with your family, your house, etc. So, it depends on when I meet people during that process. If they're transitioning and their income's beginning to increase, or they change jobs or got a promotion before they've made certain purchases or changed their spending habits, is a little easier because we can prioritize some of those things. But if they're already down that road and they've got a larger mortgage, they've got car payments, et cetera, it becomes a little more challenging to find the balance of, okay, where are we going to spend dollars? But to me, that's why we've got to, as I mentioned earlier, put it into bite-sized pieces and let's get small victories, if you will, to say, okay, we've got this discretionary income we can use to go towards retirement or go towards college or go towards insurance needs. So it's just a big balancing act, but you're right. It is very difficult, but I think also the value we add is we can take a lot of the emotion out of it. It's not to say we don't certainly care about our clients, but we're looking at it from a dollars and cents standpoint, not so much what the emotional effect may or may not be.
Now, interest rates, I want to just touch on this really quickly. I remember when early on in life, my mother worked for a bank, and they were offering anywhere from 8 to 12% on CDs. Right. I mean, we're not even, a lot of people aren't even getting that rate of return in the stock market now. So we're not necessarily seeing the growth within our savings as generations have passed. So what in God's name do you do about that?
You mean as far as putting more savings or getting more savings away?
Well, I mean, that's really, I think that you're answering the question right there. It's, I mean, we instead of relying on unbelievable rates of return, which our parents, our baby boomers generally were able to do, we're not able to make up as much ground there because, just the performance isn't there. Is that a fair statement?
I would say, again, it goes back to your allocation. I do think you can still look long term. You can get decent performance numbers. Again, that's going to be a measure of your situation, a measure of the risk you're willing to take. But to me, a lot of savings, we get fixated on returns and expenses and all of those other items, which are certainly important. But it's really just about the consistency or the grind of saving. That's really what separates. If you talk to, again, baby boomers or some of those that have been in the workforce for quite a while, they talk about as soon as they could start in their retirement plan, they began saving. Again, some of the numbers will probably make you laugh when it was $10 a month or something like that, but they consistently always did it. So when we did have those great markets, they were able to ride some of those effects. And when the markets were bad, they were able to buy into the markets at a lower amount. So again, to me, that's the most important, is just that consistency of sticking with it and staying invested, because a lot of people, again, with all the information that's available, as you know, you can get anything you want on your smartphone in 30 seconds. And I think in some ways, while it's great to have access to the information, it makes us overthink things like the markets sometimes when it's really just about that consistency.
We're supposed to be entering into our peak earning years, but boomers aren't retiring, right? So do you think that our peak earning years or the fact that we're going to be working into our 70s and 80s, much like the baby boomers are now, and How does that affect things like protection products, or because we're working so much longer, have insurance companies taken that into account when they're talking about disability insurance or life insurance or cash value life insurance? I know we're kind of pivoting there a little bit, but that just, when you were saying that just jumped into my brain.
I think you've seen some changes that the insurance companies are beginning to make, mainly where I've seen it directly because of the boomer generation is in the long-term care market. That's a big priority because you've either got obviously boomers that are utilizing it, or you have Generation X who they're dealing with their parents that had it or had a situation. So it's pretty top of mind for most people. And again, all of the insurance companies, I would say as a whole, are pretty nervous about what the exposure looks like in that world because some of it's an unknown and how much care is going to be needed. And so what I've seen over the past few years is insurance companies are becoming more creative on how they give you long-term care options. So again, permanent life insurance has always been the same. Pricing changes from time to time. So again, it'll be there, again, depending on the structure long-term. But the long-term care side, to me, is what have had the most changes and how the insurance companies are trying to structure it to make it work for them financially. Because as we know, insurance companies obviously don't do anything without calculations. And so they're trying to find that balance.
Do you find that the intensity of the meetings or the frequency of the meetings are more or less with this population versus millennials or boomers? I
would say, again, we have a very thorough process for reaching out and meeting with our clients. We don't demand it or make it mandatory, but we ideally, or I should say, we really strongly encourage it that we want to meet with our clients at a minimum of one time per year, just to have a check-in, just so we can see what's going on with them, so they can know everything going on with, their accounts, insurance, etc. But what I would say is they sometimes are maybe a little more difficult to meet with because of what we mentioned earlier. They have so many things going on. They're, getting into their peak years of earning, so they're very, very busy. They have children that, aren't really baby stage anymore, so they're into a lot of sporting events or extracurricular activities. School is becoming more difficult because they're in middle and high school where it gets more challenging. Again, they may be dealing with parents who are starting to become ill or need care of some sort. So they're really distracted, if you will, by a lot of different things that are going on. So while I think it's probably the most important group to meet with, it's a little more challenging just because they're so busy.
Yeah. And I know you're squarely in that because you've got younger kids and you're going all over the place and doing all sorts of fun stuff with your kids. But as with medical care, right, our own dental and health care, it is really, really important for you to be going in on a regular basis to get checkups, because knowing is half the battle, right? We have to know where we stand in order to make an informed decisions. Now, if you were able to give words of advice, pieces of wisdom that you could pass on to all of us Generation Xers out there, what sort of things would you say would be the absolute most important things for us to focus on? And again, high level, not getting too specific.
I would say a lot of the points I mentioned before, make sure you're taking advantage of the saving opportunities you have. Again, as we discussed, I know it's a balance between, all of the outflows and commitments that you have, but, take advantage of matching contributions through your retirement plan. Try to maximize it when you can, because again, you can't get time back. That's the biggest issue with any type of savings or long-term investments is you can't decide in 5 years down the road, I wish I would have started 5 years ago. So yeah. I would say that's, probably my first big piece of advice is to really focus on that and that consistency, that grind I mentioned of just doing it. No matter what market conditions are, no matter what's happening in the world, just consistently do it. And then you just got to determine priorities in your life. As we meet with clients, as we say, we're not here to tell you what you can or cannot do. We're just simply here to say, if you want this to happen, then there's always an opposite effect on something else may not be able to happen. So you've got to put those priorities in place to say, where do you feel like you want to spend the dollars you have available? Is it going to be for retirement? Is it going to be for college? Is it going to be to make sure your family's protected? Hopefully you can do all the above, but as we discussed, cash flow is typically pretty tight in this generation. So you've got to just decide, what I would say is make priorities and work with a planner that'll really help you lay those out and give you a plan of action so you hopefully can accomplish what you're trying to reach from a goal standpoint.
You know, Carl, I think I heard this from you at one point, and it could have been just because I've known you for so long. When you get a pay increase, don't increase your living standard. So, you know, and since a lot of Generation Xers I know personally are living right up to that level, right? When they're getting a pay raise or something like that, they're generally, no, they're freaking spending it, right? So is that part of the conversation that you have too, is maybe kind of scale back a tad?
Absolutely. Okay. That goes back to that effect that I mentioned is, you know, I'm not here to say you can't have the car, you can't have the house, or you can't have the vacations you want, but you have to understand if you do those things, there's going to be something else that's going to suffer. And so you're correct. We really talk about when you make or get a pay increase that you want to try to, defer more of that into your retirement plan, because that's just more money that'll be going away, to your fund that you'll have later in retirement. Or if you cannot live up to the maximum of your spending, you find ways to be able to live below your means. Again, it's, been around for decades of spend less than you make and usually you'll be okay. So, but then it's just tweaking, if you will, of finding where the dollars can go the furthest for you.
Any closing thoughts before we wrap up today's podcast?
Again, I would just say that the focus is on consistency. That's the big message I would leave with today. Consistency to stick with your plan. And if you don't have a plan, you need to get one, and we're happy to help you with that. Once you get your plan, stick with that consistency so you know you're on track. So as you use the medical reference before, you can choose to go to the doctor, or you can just put your head in the sand and don't know if something's wrong if you don't go but every 5 or 10 years. Same with your financial situation. You need to go, you need to look at it consistently to make sure you're getting where you want to go.
Got it. So thank you very much, Carl. I greatly appreciate your thought leadership today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt.
If you don't have a plan, that's where it seems to all begin. If you've listened to the other podcasts that Russell and Carl have done, the point is, if you don't know, if nobody's really done a real analysis of outflows, inflows, outputs, savings rates that you're saving, all of those sorts of things, and making sure that what you have from a priority standpoint is built into a tangible and flexible plan, you're really missing the boat. You need to work with somebody who's going to help you help yourself years down the road. Generation X is in a very interesting position because, millennials seem to be moving back home. A lot of them are choosing not to go to college because it's too expensive. There's a lot of really crazy stuff. Plus, our parents are getting older, and a lot of us are taking care of our aging parents. We have a lot of things on our mind. Delegating something to a professional can make just a world of difference in your overall stress level so that you feel a lot more prepared. So for everybody at Jacobs, Coolidge & Company, this is Matt Halloran, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.
The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions expressed and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Russell C. Jacobs III, Carl B. Coolidge, James Jacobs, and William Schwartz are registered representatives of and offer securities, investment advisory, and financial planning services through MML Investor Services, LLC, member SIPC, Supervisory Office, Jacksonville, Florida. Jacobs, Coolidge & Company, LLC is not a subsidiary or affiliate of MML Investor Services, LLC, or its affiliated companies.